in that space. And I always teach our first time investors, like, try to find a deal like that, because we're not trying, like, on your first deal, we're not trying to swim in the deep end and some deal that just like barely works. We want a deal that really works, that's sound, because you're learning in this one. So there's going to be some, speed bumps naturally of you just learning through this process. So let's not get something that already has teeny tiny margins. But what are some of the tips and tricks that we need to look at when we're evaluating a new investor to ensure they're even ready to start analyzing deals?
Well, a lot of it is just knowing your numbers. So if you're looking at a rehab, okay, the three basic ones: what are we buying it for? How much is the rehab? And what's the ARV, or after repair value? So, I mean, if we don't know that, then we don't know anything.
Yeah.
Because that is going to drive literally everything in the conversation.
I sometimes get a text and it's just the address.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I need some more information. I do some things, but I need information.
Yep, it's a house.
Yeah.
It's totally
it's
a
not
house.
A ton of information.
Yeah.
We're not a ton. So
pretty
again,
basic.
Purchase price, rehab, ARV, and then from there.
And then, I mean, well, I would say the other thing would be what's your exit strategy? Are you flipping it, or are you going to keep it? And if you're going to keep it, what's it going to rent for? What do you think the annual insurance is going to be, and what are the annual taxes, right?
Well, it's not every deal that works on the front end, and I say front end as in, like, if you were going to flip the property, not every deal that works as a flip works as a rental.
That is 100%
100% is not the case. So you need to be full. You may want to keep it as a rental, and I support you in that. If the numbers make sense,
I think the opposite is true. I mean, there are definitely markets where, okay, you put a little bit of money into it, and you're going to get a better ARV, and you're going to get crazy cash flow, but you're not going to make so much on the ARV that if you flip it, you're going to maybe break even. Like I think of like Dayton. Dayton is kind of like a market like that, where
our after values are so small that if I flipped it, cool, I make 10, 15K, but is 10, 15K worth it, or is my $400 a month in cash flow worth it?
Yeah.
Probably $400 a month in cash flow, because what's that 10, 15K going to do long term? So it's really, what's your goals? And honestly, my initial conversations with most investors are talking about risk tolerance and goals. Why are you getting into investment real estate? Tell me a little bit about that. What made you get to the point of having a conversation with someone like us, so that we kind of figure out, are we trying to replace your W-2 income? Are you wanting to potentially do this full time? Is this just something that you're supplementing for retirement? Are we doing this with friends or family? What's the partnership look like? Is this just you, or is there other people involved? And then the big factor is, what's your risk tolerance like? Are we getting into flips, or are we just looking for turnkey rentals? And there's not a problem with either one of those answers. It's just, don't go swim in the deep end if you're not comfortable. For that, until you get that first deal under your belt and get kind of comfortable, don't go out of your comfort zone. It's not necessary. There's plenty of transactions that are doable in this space that are within anyone's comfort zone.
What do you think are some prerequisites for somebody to hit before they start investing?
So really, honestly, the two things that we need to look at is credit and funds to close.
Yeah.
Outside of that, if the deal makes sense, the next two questions I ask are, have you looked at your personal credit recently? So though we are going to pull personal credit, none of our loans report to your personal credit, which is a caveat, and we can get into that later. And then second, where's money coming from? Because I think there's this perception that everyone's getting into deals with no money out of pocket. There's going to be a deal where, we can get strategic and put you in certain products that make sense, that could limit your funds into a deal. And or you could be bringing someone into the mix that's paying for this down payment, et cetera. But when it gets down to it, there is going to be a down payment.
Yeah.
There is going to be closing costs. So
how are we covering them?
Where's that coming from? Is that your bank account? Is that a home equity line of credit? Is that Grandpa Dale that's helping you out? We just need to know those answers so that we can guide you accordingly.
You hit something real solidly, and that was a home equity line of credit. Home equity lines of credit, they're fantastic because first of all, if you never use it, then you're not really going to pay anything for it.
So pause for a second. What is a home equity line of credit?
Oh yeah. That's okay. So it's typically on a primary residence. That's where we take the difference between what you owe and what the value is, and up to a certain level, sometimes 100%, but whatever that equity is, that difference, we'll give it to you in a line of credit. Now, it's not really us, because we don't do home equity lines of credit. We don't do those things. Yeah, go to a credit union, maybe your local bank. They're going to be the best option for you for that. But it's great to have in your back pocket, because if you need a little extra cash to get something done, then, you can use that.
And I think a ton of real estate investors start with a HELOC, and that's okay. I have a level of nervousness that comes with that just because you are playing around with the equity of your primary residence. So
Yeah.
be mindful of that, understand kind of what you're playing with. But at the same time, if you're getting into sound transactions and you have a plan of action as to how you're going to pay down the home equity line of credit, it's super easy to use in our space.
That is the key.
Yep.
You definitely want to have an exit strategy from the home equity line of credit. So so to get back to one of the things that you were talking about is 100% financing, zero money down. Well, that's kind of a way that you can do it.
Yeah.
So you could get a home equity line of credit. You could use that for the down payment and closing costs. And then the actual loan on the property would cover the other 80, 70%, whatever it is on that property. And then, so in that scenario, yes, it is $0 out of pocket because you're using the equity in your house.
Flip the property, you pay off the HELOC, you take the profit and put it in your pocket, or, we refinance you and pay off the outstanding loan from the hard money lender to cover a portion potentially of what's outstanding on the HELOC. But
the biggest thing is, don't get seduced by an interest-only payment on a HELOC. Because, first of all, interest rates on HELOCs are going to be a lot less than, let's say, hard money, for instance. But what I often see is people will just let it ride. And it's like, if you've got a 15-year term or a 20-year term, they get used to only paying $200 a month. And then all of a sudden, if rates go up, then your payment goes up. Or you just reach the end of your term. And if you hadn't come up with a plan how to do it, how to refinance it, you could be in a pickle. I have a quick story. So I come from the world of banking and wealth management and private banking, and that's hence the jacket and the cow shirt. But I had a client once who had a home equity line of credit. He was a millionaire, right? Yeah. And he had a home equity line of credit for $700,000, and he drew all $700,000. Yeah. And his term was 10 years, and he got to the end of the 10 years. And his full payment of $700,000 was due. Yeah. And he just kind of didn't think about it. And so what happened? Well, he got I think it was a 5% penalty so he got a 5% late fee. And 5% of $700,000 is like 35 grand. So he got a late fee of $35,000 just because he didn't think about it. He didn't even care. He's like, well, it's $500 a month. I'll just do.
I actually ran into that a ton. I was at Huntington for years, and I was always shocked. Every time I closed on a HELOC, I was like, okay, so what's our plan? What are we going to be using this for? Like, oh, we're going to put a new patio in the back of the house. I'm like, great. How much is that going to cost? They're like, $25,000. Like, perfect. So how fast do you want to pay it off? They're like, pay it off. I was like, yeah, you're going to use this money. So like, what's your plan? Because in a lot of cases, you're used to like auto loans or your mortgage where there's a fixed payment. You know exactly what you're supposed to pay. Home equity lines of credit are not that structured. And so you have to come up with your plan. And so I was like, cool, you're going to pay it off in 10 years. Is that the plan? Like, to just like start there. And I told them what the payment was. And they were like, we don't want that payment. Then you shouldn't be getting this loan. Yeah. Like, it's as simple as that. So it's really just making sure you have a plan. If you're going to use the home equity line of credit, make sure you have that plan. But also, let's be simple. This can come out of your checking. This can come out of your savings. I don't know that I jump up and down about pulling out of retirement, but technically that's an option. Grandpa Dale. I talked about Grandpa Dale's. Can come from Grandpa Dale, but on your first deal, let's make Grandpa Dale part of the entity that's buying this. That's going to be easier. But again, credit and funds to close will be the main things that we ask after we say, well, I would say prior to finding a good deal. What else is going to be huge for a first-time investor to be mindful of? Making sure they have that team in place.
Yeah, the team.
The team. Like, who's going to be flipping this property with you? What contractor are you going to be using? How are you finding your deals? Who's going to be part of your team to ensure that this first deal is solid? Yeah. And I think too often people get excited, and I appreciate. To be honest, we have 14 doors, and I still get excited every time I land a transaction. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to downplay the excitement. I don't want to take that away from anybody, but don't let it control getting into a deal or not. And the good thing is every time I get a transaction, no matter if it's a first-time investor or honestly, even the guys that are big names, I look at it as if it's my deal. Yeah. I look at it as if it's my transaction and I'm taking it down, and I look at it and I'm like, wait a second. Why are we doing this? Yeah. And I always ask the question, hey, what am I not seeing on the number side of this? Is there something about this deal that I'm not seeing? Maybe it's going to cash flow super great on the back end. Sweet. Didn't know that yet. Now it makes sense as to maybe why you're leaving some money in this transaction, or, hey, we're going to use it as a short-term rental and the cash flow is insane. Sweet. Awesome. Let's talk more about that and make sure that we're positioning you in loan products on the back end that makes sense for that. Maybe it's in a really appreciating area. makes me nervous because appreciation is not guaranteed. Appreciation
It's
is not
not.
guaranteed. So Columbus, Ohio, highly appreciating expected city. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed, which is, something that you have to keep in mind and make sure you're not making your real estate transactions because of appreciation solely. So just really figuring out all those moving parts before you start that first deal,
Yeah,
start making those moves, and we'll be here to support you in that.
absolutely.